Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another edition of our Big Time Boxing Show. We're happy to welcome you, and we are delighted on this show that we're going to be able to talk to Sergio Mora, former world champion and now an excellent broadcaster on DAZN. Before we do that, though, I'm going to talk a little bit about a fight coming up on October 26th, a battle of left-handers in the best division in boxing, the 140-pound division. Jack Catterall will be taking on former champion Regis Prograis in a fight that has all kinds of implications for both men and for the division in general. For Catterall, at age 31, who has had only one loss in his 30 professional fights, that one to Josh Taylor. He avenged that loss to Taylor in his very last fight, and he has been a perennial contender in that division for the last couple of years. Now, for Regis Prograis, a slightly different story because at age 35, he lost his title in his last fight against Devin Haney, and in the fight before that, had kind of a subpar performance in defending his title. So there's a lot to prove for Regis Prograis as he goes into this fight, and it is certainly a must-win for him at this point, and very important for Catterall as well. I think it's going to be a terrific fight, and I can't wait. I'm anxious to see that. You can see that fight on DAZN, which brings us to our guest, who you also see on DAZN on a regular basis. He is one of the broadcast team, does an excellent job commentating on the fights on DAZN, and I'm delighted to welcome Sergio Mora. Sergio, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you here.
Very nice to have you. I've been meaning to do this. We just started the show a month or two ago, and high on my guest list was you, and I'm happy that you decided to join us. You have a good, really interesting schedule coming up in the DAZN fights. There's been a lot of terrific fights, I think, in the last 4 or 5 months that you've had a chance to comment on DAZN. We're going to get to that schedule in just a moment, but I wanted to just circle back for just a minute or two, because still on our minds is the fight that happened this past weekend between the two great light heavyweights, Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. And it ended up being, not surprisingly, a close and competitive matchup, one that brought with it some controversy. Your comments generally on the fight were that you kind of thought Bivol edged the decision, which I did as well. Have you thought about it again, and has anything changed your mind about that?
No, not at all. I mean, I watched the fight and I talked to it with my trainer. Me and my trainer talk after controversial fights, and this was a controversial fight. I was
Yeah.
getting a lot of feedback from people on social media, but I like going back and forth with people and listening to their critiques and their side of the story. You know, I want to be open-minded, but no one really convinced me. And if you really watch the former champions and former fighters, what they thought, everybody, I would say 99.9% had it for Bivol winning. That's not a coincidence how we know what we're watching. As a fan, and we got to respect the fans,
Sure.
so they like aggression. They like the guy that tries to push the fight. They like the power puncher, the one that actually is going for the knockout. Of course, that's going to be natural, but for us, we have to also keep in mind that there's a criteria in boxing, and that it's not all aggression. It's not all coming forward and who throws the most punches. It's effective aggression, defense, and ring generalship. I think Dmitry Bivol is an expert at the last two. And, defensively, I don't think he got hit with none of the big bombs that Beterbiev was throwing. He was hitting the gloves, and then we did get hit. He was taking the shots in between. So I edged it for Bivol in this fight.
Yeah, and I agree with you at 115, 113. One of the things that I think created the controversy, and it was a close fight, obviously, because if we say
Right.
it's 115, 113, that speaks to the fact that it was a very close fight. And there were rounds in which Beterbiev was able to sustain his offense with some meaningful punches. Not, as you point out, many of those during a lot of those rounds weren't landing as well as he would like. But one of the scorecards that was handed in was 116, 112 for Beterbiev. When there's an outlier like that, it further amps up people, I think, because it makes them even feel more strongly about the decision. I think anybody could see that fight potentially being a draw, maybe, but I don't know if anybody could imagine it being 116, 112 for Beterbiev.
No, not at all. And I think I said that on social media myself. I think it was Bivol or at worst a draw. And when
Yeah.
you say at worst a draw, that means Beterbiev, wasn't in the mix when it came to winning this fight. And at 116, 112, I think everyone really got on that judge. I don't remember his name, but outlier. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
That would be,
I agree.
he would be the
That's the word.
ultimate outlier on
I,
this one.
I I agree with the second syllable. No, those judges right there, they actually they need to be held responsible. Well, I mean, we can't keep having this. What if that one card was the
Right.
determining factor in this great fight, and all eyes were on this fight in Riyadh, and that was the determining factor, and that was what swayed the decision. It would have been an outcry. Forget an outlier; it would have been an outcry. So it needs to be nipped in the bud. And I know we say this every single
Yeah.
time, but if you don't hit them in the pocket and hit them where it hurts, and keep giving them jobs, they're going to keep doing this.
Yeah, unfortunate. At the end of the day, of course, it was a competitive and interesting fight. Not a thriller, but a very interesting and well-fought fight between these two men. And Artur Beterbiev does get the ultimate nod, and he moves on to be undisputed champion. And in looking ahead for those men, could you see the possibility of a rematch? Do you think that's likely? Obviously, it would be a lot of money by the Saudis thrown at this to maybe make a rematch. Could you see it, and would that be interesting to you?
I could see a rematch, absolutely, because the first fight reminded me somewhat of Canelo Golovkin, and that was a great fight,
Good point.
But
Yeah,
no one went down. There was no cuts. There was
yeah,
no controversy. I mean, no real controversy as far as knockdowns or point deduction. And we wanted to see it again. We ended up getting a trilogy, Al. So
that's right.
whenever the best fight the best, sometimes you get Leonard Hearns, or sometimes you get fights that don't really demand a rematch. Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad, excellent example. Competitive fight, controversy. We never saw a
Yeah.
rematch. It cost too much, and we didn't need to see it. So I think the fans are going to decide. I think His Excellency Turki Al Sheikh is going to decide, and I think ultimately the fighters take some time off. Do they really want
Yeah.
to go in there and do it again?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You have, as I mentioned, a fun slate of fights coming up in the months to come, and it's going to start on November 9th on DAZN, where Jaron Ennis and Karen Chukatsian will get together. And this is a rematch of a fight they had before that. Now Ennis's title is on the line when they originally thought it was a title eliminator. And I did that fight. It was on Showtime, and I announced it. And it was a fight in which Jaron Ennis was really heavily favored, and Chukatsian was kind of an unknown quantity. He boxed extremely effectively, did Chukatsian, in that fight. Didn't get a lot done offensively, but he was able to go the distance with Jaron Ennis. And now here we are for a world championship. Could you see anything changing in this fight from their first fight, either with Ennis being more offensive or Chukatsian being more offensive?
Well, we go from one fight where we're talking about a rematch to this fight where we kind of don't really need a rematch. Al, I mean, you
Yeah.
called the fight. I watched the fight. It was a one-sided fight. I think all judges had it every round, 120,
Mhm.
109, I think it was. That doesn't demand or actually need a rematch. But here we are. It's going to be on the telecast. And I think anytime a fighter, especially a high IQ fighter like Boots Ennis and many others, once they struggle with a fighter the first time around, as you know, the second time around, they're going to figure them out a lot quicker, take more chances earlier in the fight. Chukatsian is a strong fighter. He has an amateur background. He's one of these guys that you can't make a lot of mistakes with. And you got to be careful with guys like that. So that's the reason Boots was careful for 12 rounds. But if
Yeah.
you add a second fight, you can bet that Ennis is going to figure him out a lot faster, and we're going to get what we expected in the first fight. I don't think he knocks him out either. I think it's still I think it still goes for the decision, but I think we're going to see a lot more exciting fight, more punches thrown, and maybe even Karen winning a round or two this time because he didn't win no rounds last time.
Yeah, probably didn't. He was, as you said, he was clever and showed a lot of, defensive skills, but not so much offense. Yeah, that'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if Ennis feels the pressure to create a knockout
He
in
will.
that fight.
I believe he will. I believe he will.
Yeah,
His last fight with Hovhannissian, we call that fight. He brought out everyone in Philly. I mean,
yeah,
it was a magnetic, it was electric, it was great, but he didn't get the knockout against Hovhannissian. It's hard to
no,
knock out Hovhannissian. I think he's gonna want to go for the stoppage and put on a real show back in his hometown this time around.
yeah, and fighting in front of the home fans, as you point out, and on that same card that you'll have on DAZN, also featuring one of the fighters in boxing who is. His story already is pretty extraordinary. Bam Rodriguez will be taking on Pedro Guevara, and Bam Rodriguez has had such an extraordinary journey, even though he's so young, jumping up and down in weight classes, beating legends, taking the toughest fights you can possibly take. I would think that this early going of his career portends an astonishing career as this young man continues.
At 24 years old, Al, he's
Amazing.
already he's already knocked down three of the four kings
Yeah,
at
right.
flyweight. I mean, knocking out two of them.
Yeah,
Knocked out. I mean, he knocked down Carlos Quadras, knocked out Sarissa Sarungan in an exciting fight, knocked out Gallo Estrada. I mean, it goes back to the '80s, the heydays of boxing, the great days of boxing when you get these 24-year-old, 25 at most, but these early 20s taking against the best. That
yeah,
was the heyday. When you
yeah.
get fighters in their absolute peak, they don't want to wait. They want to fight each other when they want to decide who's the big boss in that weight division. That's exactly what we're talking about with Bam Rodriguez. It's amazing what he's doing. Even when he's staying busy with fights, they're still tough fights, top contenders.
Yes.
Uh, and that's the reason he's pound for pound on everyone's list.
Well,
Everyone's list
Rivera
has
is
to
a
be top five.
perfect example. A good fighter. He's not facing somebody that's not a good fighter, and he did struggle in one of the defenses that he had against a very good fighter, but people didn't know him as well. So it's intriguing, as you say, he takes on good opposition. Who he reminds me of a little bit, Salvador Sanchez, because
Mm.
Salvador Sanchez, of course, tragically passed away because of a car accident. But Bam Rodriguez's career trajectory feels like that, right? Salvador Sanchez had taken on and beaten phenomenal fighters, Azuma Nelson, Juan Laporte, a bunch of other really good fighters, Danny Little Red Lopez, who he won the title from, before he left us. That's kind of the way Bam Rodriguez feels.
You know, when we call Bam Rodriguez fights, of course, the first thing that stands out that he fights like Lomachenko, hands up,
Yes.
southpaw. But now that you say Salvador Sanchez, I'm recollecting and remembering the great Mexican champion, and not only because he's so young and taking on the absolute
Yeah.
best, but yeah, I could see the
Yeah, not so
comparison.
much like in the ring, but just the career trajectory that of the way he's doing it. And as you pointed out correctly, in a different era where people don't do it that way, do they?
No, they don't. I mean, who was fighting Azuma Nelson, the great Azuma Nelson, before he even became great? He caught him
Right.
early in his career and beat him. And I can't remember the names, but he was knocking out fighters that became great afterwards, after his tragic passing.
Yeah, a number
So
of them. Yeah, Laporte
so
was one of them, and it was just, yeah, very, very impressive by him. But Bam Rodriguez is certainly in that category, and you've had a chance to do a lot of his fights and kind of chronicle his growth. I think we're going to see a lot more from him. That's November 9th. That's going to be part of the card that you're going to be doing on DAZN. And then on November 16th, okay, I'm going to say something. I love the cruiserweight division. I've always loved the cruiserweight division. It is
Are you being serious there? Because as my partner Chris Mannix says, it's the waste station of boxing. They always skip over the cruiserweight division.
I Right. I love the cruiserweight. I've always loved the cruiserweight division. It has produced over the course of decades, in my opinion, some of the best fights. And it's a division with some that is often ignored, as Chris pointed out, and sometimes people just go right past it because they don't want to stop at it. But I think it's a great because it has the power of men that are kind of heavyweights, but also they're speedier and they're quicker and they throw more punches. And you're going to have a cruiserweight fight on November 16th, Chris Billam-Smith against Gilberto Ramirez. And I think that is going to be a terrific fight. How do you size that one up?
Well, we had to size up Sergio Ramirez at cruiserweight first of all, and he passed the
Yeah.
test with flying colors in his last fight with Goulamirian. A lot of people were picking Goulamirian to win that
Hmm.
fight because he's a big, natural cruiserweight, strong, and we saw what Sergio did, and the way he did it, the reason he did it, was because he didn't stand in front of him too much. He knows how to fight like a smaller cruiserweight, a smaller man coming up. He uses his legs. We didn't see that much from Zurdo moving his legs because at 168, he was way too big for those guys, and he was the power puncher. At light heavyweight, we've seen a hybrid, but he still wasn't a mover. He's still like mixing it up. But at cruiserweight, he's not standing in front of opponents as far as his last fight, and I think it's because not only his training and the way that Malik Scott trains him. Malik Scott is a boxer. He was a heavyweight, and he knows how to stick
Yeah.
and move. But he just has a great combination of a mover and Malik Scott trainer, and Justin Chua, who also I think together he has a great team, Sulo Ramirez. So because of that, I'm going to favor him in this fight, but I'm not sleeping on Chris Billam-Smith. He redeemed his loss against I don't know how to say his name,
Yeah. Yeah.
But he redeemed his loss. I watched both those fights, and I like the adjustments he made in that rematch. And he's not going to have the opportunity to make adjustments with another big volume punching southpaw that already has a lot of experience moving up in weight. So I'm going to edge it out to Ramirez, but it's going to be a very difficult fight. Very
I think it's
difficult
gonna
fight.
be I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and that should be a fun one. Also on November 16th, Arnold Barbosa taking on Jose Ramirez in a fascinating 140-pound fight. I referenced that weight division being so good. Barbosa has had kind of an odd career, right? He never loses, and yet getting the brass ring for him has been tough. And of course, his family's facing a former champion in Ramirez.
I think Ramirez, this is a fight that really sets him apart because like you said, he's undefeated. Uh, I like him because he has like we like to say, swag. He has that
Yeah.
charisma. He has something about him. When you watch him at press conferences, your eyes gravitate towards him. But then when he gets in the ring, I mean, yes, he has the power. He goes after he's an exciting fighter, but he hasn't really looked that great. He hasn't stood out inside the ring. So I think this is an opportunity, an excellent opportunity against a former champion in Ramirez, where he can not only beat a once beaten former champion. Ramirez didn't look all that great in his last fight either. So
No.
it's one of these fights where they both need to shine.
Yes.
And I think Barbosa, we're gonna find out where Barbosa is made of in this fight. As
Yes.
cliche as it sounds, because Ramirez, both of them are coming off of kind of shaky performances. It's pretty much sink or swim. Do you really want to be that star if you're Barbosa? And do you really want to get another shot at the title of your Ramirez? Love these fights.
Yeah, very good fights. And you can see that on the zone. You can get to hear Sergio do his fine commentary. And speaking of that, you made the transition from being a boxer. You won the 154-pound title. You won the contender. And you had an excellent career. And then you made the transition into broadcasting. Uh, how hard was it for you to make that transition? And what along the way are the things that you've kind of cobbled together that create your kind of what you might call your philosophy of broadcasting?
I think you froze there, Al.
Oh, did I freeze? Do you have me now?
I have you now, but I got the question. Well, I'm talking to a legend of broadcasting, so you would know. But everyone has a different experience, and I humbly would like to say that I just listen and learn from, greats like you, greats that,
That's
I've
sweet.
seen, greats that I've worked with. I haven't had the pleasure to work with you, but
I
hopefully
know we
now,
have to do a fight together sometime. That would be so much
hopefully,
fun.
hopefully, hopefully I would one day have an opportunity to work with you, because I have worked with Steve Farhood, and that was
Yes.
great. And I've sat down with him and I picked his brain more than anybody. I picked a lot of greats that I've worked with, so,
We all learn from people that we're around and that we work with and that people that we pick up little things. It's the nature of it, isn't it?
Brian Canny, Joe Tessitore,
Yeah.
Todd Grisham, Brian Custer. The list goes on and on. All these guys that I've got the pleasure to work alongside with, and just pick their brain, just pick their
Hmm.
brain little by little. And yeah, of course, repetition. Knowing what you do good, knowing what you do bad, knowing when to shut up. Great. That's a great quality I had to learn the hard
That's the
way with.
hardest part sometimes, isn't it?
The hardest part is just shut up. The fans are going to do the talking, the
Yeah.
cheering. That's the commentating. Shut up.
Yeah.
And then not taking the job way too serious either.
Yeah.
With Todd Grisham, we have a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
his way of doing commentating is, look, man, just pretend we're at a bar, we're having a drink, and we're watching the fight, and we happen to have a microphone. I go, all right, but don't cuss. I'm like, okay. And then when I work with Brian Kenny or anyone else that comes from the
Yeah.
old school professional like yourself, then I gotta put on my suit and tie and bring out the boxing vernacular and be on my best behavior and just follow
That's
your
funny.
lead. So yeah, it's a chemistry thing, But
It is, yeah.
hopefully one day we get to go back and
Yeah,
forth.
that would be a lot of fun. I would love that. Yeah, and you make an interesting point that, there are a lot of different ways to approach it, and part of the challenge is, as you point out, to know when to add something, when to not add something, and you do a great job. And you look at it from the fighter's viewpoint often, but you also are capable, which I think is you know, a great tool to have. You're capable of doing what sometimes ex-athletes have a hard time doing, and that is taking one step back and looking at the fight from a broader view and not just putting yourself in the mind of one of the fighters or both of them. And that's kind of an important thing because that makes you more of an outside objective observer, not necessarily right in their minds.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge. I would say
Yeah,
that we have as former champions, and now putting ourselves in the position of the fighters. You vicariously, what is he feeling? What is he
right.
thinking? What does he need to do? And then putting that into words, and then knowing when to interject, when to pause, when to come back, when to higher the level, when to just quiet it down. These are all things that
Yeah,
it's a back and forth dance, and it just comes with repetition. It comes with working with different
absolutely.
people, different personalities.
Yeah,
Because I'm not gonna work with you like I'll work with Todd. Todd's like
yeah.
yeah.
That's absolutely true. I mean, 43 years I've worked with about 8 zillion partners, approximately. And it is true that each person has their own approach and their own cadence, and it's fun. But you do a great job of bringing fans into the fight and giving us not only great analysis of what's going on, but also the feeling of what's going on with the fighters. And I get the distinct impression from you that you are thoroughly enjoying the process.
Oh man, athletes, forget boxers. Athletes have a hard time struggling and adjusting to the transition after the
Yeah,
performances inside the ring or in basketball court. So there's only a certain amount of these jobs available on television to
yeah,
to
right.
to do what you actually did in your entire life. I don't know anything else other than boxing. I don't have no resume and anything else. So for me to actually have the privilege to do this, I love the people I work with. I love the energy I get, and vicariously, it's the closest thing to being in the ring is being right outside of
Yeah,
it and still hearing the punches, seeing the punches, seeing the blood, and I still get that adrenaline rush. But now I have to put it into words and not in combinations.
great. Well, we all enjoy listening to you, and I know you're going to continue to do it for a long, long time. And we're enjoying the fights on DAZN. You guys have had a great run of really, really good boxing on that platform for several years at least. And it's very important for boxing right now to have places where people can see the sport. Sometimes those, that part of the equation always changes. It's never stagnant, and it's always different. But you're on DAZN, you guys are providing a lot of great boxing for people. So and I appreciate so much you coming on and sharing some time with me. I may bug you again down the road and have you come back again.
Al, it ain't bugging. When you called, I came running. I said, absolutely, I'll be there. Anytime I get to pick the brain of another legend, I'm there.
You're very sweet. Well, I appreciate it, Sergio. Have fun with these fights in November, and hopefully, I'll get a chance to bump into you. Maybe the next time you're here in Las Vegas, when you guys come here, we'll go out and have a cocktail.
Or even better, one day we get the chance to work along each other. That'll be a
Now
bucket lister.
that I would love. That'd be a lot
That'll
of
be
fun.
a bucket lister for me.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Well, I would enjoy it greatly. Hey, listen, you take care, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Al.
All righty. So that is a delightful conversation with Sergio Mora. So enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure you did. That'll do it for this edition of our Big Time Boxing Show, and we'll see you next time.